Good evening, everyone. This is a public hearing of the Onondaga County Reapportionment Commission. Thank you all for attending. We're here to listen to your comments regarding the redistricting of the Onondaga County Legislature. That's our job here tonight, is to listen to you, the public. Well, I'm going to call speakers in the order that you signed in. I'll identify you by name and call you up to the podium, and you can then provide us your commentary. As I said before, we won't be answering questions. We'll be listening, however, very intently on what you have to say. The first speaker is Carrie Egerbrecht.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Egerbrecht. I'm a lifetime resident of Onondaga County, a 20-year public school teacher, and candidate for Claytown Board. My comments are mostly directed to Commissioner Hausland. You were recently quoted as saying, "We're not rushing, we've never rushed," regarding the condensed redistricting timeline that could have taken 3 months, but instead is compacted to 21 days. Why? What are you so afraid of? Let the election season conclude and then finalize the work set forth through the redistricting process. Why the rush? Is it the fact that the whole legislature is up for re-election? It appears that you are rushing things, as evidenced by your timeline. Scheduling public hearings, the majority of which were held during work hours, shows what a disconnect you appear to have from the working people. We, the people, want equal and fair processes along with representation for both parties. It's imperative that all the residents of Onondaga County are properly represented, and the process should be collaborative and truly bipartisan. There's a myriad of parameters to work under to ensure the map drawn is constitutional, so the lens of rushing this looks questionable to many. Considering you, sir, are the campaign lawyer for the county executive, you might want to rethink how you frame things, because perception, in politics especially, is everything. Living in Clay, downwind from White Pine property, I have seen firsthand how the county executive and Oneida treated residents, most of which are of the Republican Party. I have witnessed the terrible results of the threats of eminent domain and truly believe that if McMahon would threaten to forcibly remove members of his own party from their homes, why wouldn't it be possible to imagine a Republican majority commission would make choices to disenfranchise the Democratic minority? I work to raise my children to believe in fairness and being truthful. I would hope that all decision makers of this committee do just that, working collaboratively to negotiate maps that serve people, all the people. Rushing the process could have long-lasting consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Judy Schmidt.
Hi, my name is Judy. I live on the east side of the city of Syracuse. My husband and I raised our daughter in the university area of the city of Syracuse. Prior to that, I bought my first house at the age of 24 and lived at Tipperary Hill in the city of Syracuse. But I was born in Lincourt, grew up in Baldwinsville, and spent many, many years in Liverpool in the town of Clay, other than a short stint as a journalist in the Marine Corps. These are my concerns. 15 out of 17 county legislature candidates signed a pledge to support nonpartisan redistricting prior to the last election. Once elected, oddly, the Republican signees reneged on their pledges. All legislature Republicans then voted down a proposal to give redistricting power to a panel of nonpartisan citizens. It appears to me that the Republicans are concerned by the possibility that the Democrats will become the majority party in the county legislature, and therefore, based on how Republicans choose to keep the redistricting commission's format as is, the Democrats then would have the majority on the commission after the November 2nd election. It also appears to me that there is no other reason for this process to be rushed through before the election without community review. In the course of 1 week, the Republican county legislators proposed establishing this commission, voted on it, and then appointed its members, the majority of them Republicans, 1 week. The open meetings for citizen input on the unseen maps up until now have been scheduled during the day. The excuse that we're busy too and we find the time to meet during the day, as espoused by some legislators, is demeaning. Many of us fellow citizens work or have daytime commitments and are not paid a full-time salary for a part-time elected position. As the districts to be redrawn are not due until the 2023 election, we should have time to study these new maps and give our input into the process. The way the districts are now, towns, villages, and city neighborhoods are sliced and diced that only makes sense if one party is trying to outmaneuver the other. Will they be this way again in a rushed process? I'm registered my opposition to this ridiculous partisan power grab that will affect our county for the next 10 years. In my experience in living in towns and in the city, I have found that people align themselves with their school districts and their communities, whether it's a village or a few city blocks. And now that we do have maps to compare and study and learn, we need to understand them and the logic that created both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. The next speaker is Stu Koenig.
I'm Stu Koenig, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and that's fine.
I've never met you before.
I hear that often. And I'm married to Judy, and that's why I'm here today. I'm not a person that sees the world through rose-colored glasses, and at the same time, the way things are going in our country, we're at a crossroads of democracy, and I want to expect better of my home. I've been a resident of Syracuse for more than 40 years, and I'm quite involved in the community. And I'm ready for our people, our government, to be able to act in fairness. And in this case, it's very, very important, not for the Democrats or for the Republicans, but for the citizens to get a fair shake. And what that means is the Republicans should not be jamming a plan down before Election Day. It absolutely makes no sense, and it's wrong. And I would like the Republicans, the ones that I'm talking to tonight, and the people that you work with, to think long and hard about what is fair and what is right, and to do the right thing. And all that means is waiting till we get a better chance to understand the maps. I assume there would be compromises, but not to jam this down the county's throat. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. The next speaker is Sandy Smith.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Sandy Smith. I live in the town of DeWitt. And I thought that instead of telling you what I think about the redistricting process, I would fill you in on what I have been hearing at the doors while canvassing over the last several weeks. I have been canvassing mostly unaffiliated voters, but some Democrats and Republicans as well. I've had dozens of conversations with voters and this is what they have told me. For those who have been following the county races, the one issue which seems to animate them is the gerrymandering issue, and it seems to cut across party lines. They all seem to understand that partisan gerrymandering is antithetical to good governance and bad for democracy. They believe all votes, regardless of where you live in the county, should have the same weight, and they understand that the current district maps result in some people's votes carrying more weight than others. They would like to see, well, when I asked them, what would you like to see? They said, we would like to see competitive districts so that legislators have to earn their votes. They would like to choose their representatives instead of the representatives choosing them. They would like to see districts drawn so that communities of common interest are not divided up. The voters I spoke with are more aware of what is going on than I would have predicted. Maybe this has to do with the newspaper coverage, but they really seem to be aware of what's going on. Their consciousness about gerrymandering has been raised, and they don't like what they're seeing in the current process. They know that this is a partisan commission, despite the pledges made 2 years ago to make it a nonpartisan process. They don't like the fact that the process is being rushed. They don't like the fact that hearings are scheduled at inconvenient times. They would like to be able to respond to the proposed maps once they are available, which just happened today. Probably they would appreciate hearings to explain the proposed maps and for the people who drew the maps to be able to answer their questions. The voters I spoke with want fairness above all else, and I think they deserve that. Let's slow the process down and get it right this time. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandy. The next speaker is Doug Wolf.
Thank you. My name is Doug Wolf. I'm a 30-year resident of Syracuse. And my comment and concerns where the lines are drawn on the map that we end up with. The current practice of having districts that are, include some of Syracuse and lots of the suburbs, especially not ones that have not much Syracuse and a lot of the suburbs, are drawn in such a way that they dilute the interests of the city in the legislature and ultimately undermine the representativeness of the legislature. I did some calculations today based on the newest numbers, and the city of Syracuse has over 31% of the population of the county. And the previous speaker talked about residents that she's come in contact with who say the legislature should represent, the district should represent groups of people with common interests. And I believe that the city in which one lives is a leading aspect of that common interest. With Syracuse having over 30% of the county's population, if you just randomly pick the legislature of 17 people from where the people live, you should end up with 5 Syracuse residents on the legislature. Now, there's different ways of defining common interests. It could be, or identity. It could be racial identity, economic identity, partisan identity. There's other ways of doing it. the remainder of my comment, I want to allude to a letter that appeared in the local paper over the weekend from someone whose name I don't remember. They were a former member of this legislature. And they seem to be arguing for diversity within the districts that are drawn. And I would argue that that's a flawed argument. What you want to end up with is diversity in the legislature, not in the individual districts that make it up. So that's another way of arguing that the city should be represented proportionally with people from the city, and the suburbs should be represented proportionally with people from the suburbs. So if we would have that, I think we'd have a very different looking legislature than we do now.
Thank you. The next speaker is David Dreesen.
Hi, my name is David Dreesen. I'm a professor of environmental law and constitutional law at Syracuse University College of Law. My recent work has been a study of democratic decline and how democracies are lost, and you'll see that that informs my perspective on these proceedings. I've lived in this community for decades, first in the city of Syracuse, and now in the town of DeWitt. And I think I want to start off on a positive note and note the opportunity that this commission has to write fair maps. And by that I mean maps that adhere to community lines, that are paid with no attention to voting patterns or party membership or any of that are fair lines, and they would look nothing like the existing maps, which are clearly the product of what is called cracking and packing. So the techniques for gerrymandering are pretty well understood. What a majority party does that's trying to lock themselves in the office and create unfair maps is they take the voters of the opposition party and scatter them about many districts so that they are a minority, and then they pack the remainder of the few places where they can as little impact as possible, where they'll have a great majority. My anxiety has been is that this looks like, I haven't had a chance to study these maps, we'll need hearings on them with adequate notice and lots of explanation and time to study them. But my anxiety has been that this would be an exercise of what the law review literature calls gerrymandering, where the objective is to more or less follow the old pattern. Maybe that's not what's happening, I hope not. The opportunity to give fair maps is really important for healing divisions and making elections fair. And let me talk about some of the values of that. There's a big problem in this county that people, even people who are somewhat politically active, do not know who their legislators are. And that's partly a product of districts where they don't correspond very often to community lines. And so that would help with that. America is more divided than it has been since the Civil War. A lot of the population believes that elections have been either stolen or rigged. And I'm glad that we have not quite the degree of division here that we do other places, but I see the division increasing here, and I'm anxious about it not getting worse. So if this committee can agree on maps that all parties think are fair, I think they could do a lot in healing that division, in seeing to it that this county does not disintegrate into a place where half the people of the county or more think the process is unfair. So I think it's very important to come to agreement, and therefore I'm very distressed to see two parties' maps up here. That is not the way the process should work. I think the principle that Sandy mentioned is absolutely right. Voters should select candidates. Politicians should not choose voters. And that has a number of salutary effects. It forces politicians to tailor their positions to what constituents want and to listen to constituents in order to win, because they can't be sure of winning otherwise. And that's what gerrymandering does, is it sort of makes it a foregone conclusion to a large extent to a greater extent than it should be, of who's going to win. That implies the commission members must ignore the desires of elected politicians to favor their own parties. And Kevin, I had a question for you with respect to that. Are you representing a client in these proceedings?
I can't answer the question, but I can tell you one thing that everyone's gotten wrong. I've met Ryan McMahon twice in my life, and everyone's calling me his campaign lawyer because I wrote a letter, one letter, on his behalf, and I didn't even talk to him about that letter because his opponent was saying untruthful things. So I am not his campaign lawyer. I barely know him. But
Michael, you didn't answer the question of whether you represent a client. Under Rule 3.9 of the New York
absolutely
State
not. I'm a volunteer.
So you're not representing a client?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Okay. Just
Not even
wanted to clarify
close.
that.
Not even close.
Good. Okay. Very well. But you all need to, I'm glad you haven't met much with McMahon, but another question I had is when was the Republican map prepared?
We're not here to give you information. We're here to listen to you.
No, you said we could ask you questions.
No, I didn't. I said just the opposite. We're not here to answer questions. We're not here to answer questions.
It
We're here to
doesn't seem like you're
listen
willing
to you.
to review what's going on with the process.
We're here to listen to you. Have you looked at the maps?
I had 5 minutes to look at the maps.
Both maps?
Huh?
Did you look at both maps?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. I'm really surprised you won't answer that question. It's a basic process question.
No, we're not here. We're not here to answer questions. Dustin agrees.
No, I don't agree on how we prove
Well,
it.
that's not-
But I will answer that. That map was provided to the committee at 8:30. That's a matter of public record from this morning's committee.
Okay. So part of my anxiety about this is that the other thing is gerrymandering is a well-known cause of partisan division. It exacerbates it because if people know that when they appeal to their party's base and they don't move toward the center, and then it becomes hard for legislators to work through compromise. And I've noticed that in many, many cases, this legislature is not working properly. There are a lot of party line votes, things being done at the last minute without consultation with a minority party, and some of that may be because of the gerrymandering that we've experienced. And my anxiety is pretty high on this because division and gerrymandering has caused loss of democracy in other countries. And this county should not be contributing to the loss of democracy in the United States, which I think is a real possibility. The behavior of this committee so far suggests that it has no intention of being fair, even to its members, let alone the public. My understanding is that the schedule for these hearings was announced by the majority of the committee without consulting the calendars of the minority. I don't know if you even consider the majority. And that's disrespectful. It's contrary to our constitutional tradition, which is a tradition of fairness, a tradition of respect for minority parties, a desire for everybody to participate, and that kind of process requires that we set up public hearings, that people's views about when they should be held be heard, and that if at all possible, they be set when everybody has said they're available. Request of the election commissioners to postpone the hearings so that they could focus on the elections were ignored. I feel like this is not as gross, but a part of a pattern of disrespecting election officials that is threatening keeping those people in office. We desperately need bipartisan election commissions where everybody has faith in the officials and where they're able to do their jobs. And I feel like I'm undermining the public officials is bad news. The reason I ask the question is that the schedule that this commission is on suggests that the people establishing the committee have already written that, and the commission will not, in fact, create one cooperative proceeding based on public input, because that will require more time than the schedule allows. I think it's critical that the map be agreed map, not one imposed by one party or another, otherwise it would fail the function of inspiring confidence and healing divisions. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak about the general principles of fair maps here. Obviously, I've not had time to study these maps. You'll need subsequent hearings with ample notice, explanation, and opportunity to study the maps. There's no reason to rush. If this committee approves gerrymandered districts supported only by one party, another party will have to throw out the maps as soon as it takes power. Fair maps will create stability. And if the current party remains in power, it will have ample time to write maps. It being fair, I hope it will still write fair maps. A rush, obviously unfair process, harms the Republican Party by harming their reputation with the public. So I urge you to slow down, to reach a bipartisan solution, and to draw fair maps that are about keeping communities together and do not take into account voters' party affiliations and patterns. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mary Jensen.
Can I take my mask off or should I leave it on? I don't know what the rules are.
I don't care, but hey, you better ask Dustin.
Does it, I don't know what the rules are. Can you hear me?
I don't care.
I believe the procedure in here is you can take it off at the microphone.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you feel like it's, I'm okay with that.
That's fine. It's fine with me if you want to take your mask off.
Thanks, I mostly wear them because I believe in them, just for the record. But for here, I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I say. The first thing I want to say is, it is not easy following David Dreesen. Can we just acknowledge that? That man has forgotten more than I'll ever learn about gerrymandering and the Constitution and the right to vote. So when I saw I was next, I was a little nervous. So I hope you can bear with me. I'm here today as a mom. I'm here today because I heard somebody say that none of us cared about any of this. I care. I want you to know I deeply care about this. There is no reason to rush this. I read the Syracuse.com editorial. I read lots of stuff. You guys have time. There's only one reason to rush this, and it's not pretty. That's something I think is important. As a mom, I want you to know, and first of all, I'm representing my family, a few of my neighbors, some of my friends. I've lived in Onondaga County for more than 35 years, most of that time in the town of Manlius, some of it in DeWitt, but I've lived in Manlius for more than 20 years. And I don't think you guys care what I think anytime. So given this opportunity, I'm coming. And I'm going to stand here and let you know what I think, what my friends think, what my family thinks, what my neighbors think. Because we're all thinking the same thing. We're thinking you guys all play a game every couple of years and we lose. You rearrange things to keep yourselves and your friends employed and we lose. I don't know how to couch it the way David Dreesen does, but I know what it feels like to lose a game I'm not playing and where I have no control over the rules. None. You guys signed pledges saying that you would support fair maps. And then given the opportunity to vote on it, you voted against that. So what that told me, my family and my neighbors, was that you can't be taken at your word. None of you that signed it and then voted against it can be taken seriously on anything. Okay, voting is a gift. Voting is a gift that democracy gives to the people. And you guys are working to interfere with that gift. And I, Mary Jensen, the mom that I am, has a problem with that. And this is why I have a problem with that. My kids graduated from high school here, went to college 100 miles away. They both went to college in Rochester.